All right, let's just get right into it. Forget everything you've learned in your classical mechanics classes about time being some passive, invisible dimension that we just float through. Today, we're exploring the S-DMT framework, which completely rewrites that narrative. We're going to see how time is actually a mechanical fractal torsion force. And yeah, we'll get into what that means for us, how we are essentially complex human solitons, just trying to maintain our shape and navigate all of this.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, the problem of time. Then, the architecture of the superfluid plenum, the master equation of torsion, entropy, and thixotropic friction, the jitterbug coupling, and finally, how this all comes together into a self-sustaining machine. Let's hit it.
Section 1. The problem of time and the breakdown of classical mechanics. Look, as physics undergrads, you guys already know the massive crisis we've got in modern physics. Boltzmann, general relativity, quantum mechanics, they all hit a brick wall when it comes to time. Why does time only flow in one direction at the microscopic level? Boltzmann gave us entropy, sure, but no actual mechanical reason for why it happens at the particle level. Relativity treats time like a static coordinate. Quantum mechanics, it's just an external parameter taking away on a clock. None of these actually explain the real engine of time. So, we've got a massive paradigm shift here. Classical physics assumes time is just a passive container for events, right? And irreversibility supposedly comes from some mysteriously low entropy Big Bang. Well, the S-DMT framework tosses that right out the window. It proposes that time is an actively generated, unidirectional torsion force. Irreversibility isn't magic. It's driven by actual, measurable temporal friction that breaks symmetry on a microscopic level.
Moving on to Section 2, the architecture of the superfluid plenum, or the physical substrate of all this.
Okay, so what is this universe made of in the S-DMT model? It's modeled as a scalar density field made entirely of thixotropic superfluid hydrogen. We call this the plenum, and it's not just a random soup. Imagine this fluid is structured by a highly specific, discrete fractal geometry, a golden cross network made up of 39 cubes. So empty space? Not a thing. It's actually a rigid, vibrating architecture, bathed in a fluid that reacts to shear stress. Now, like any system you've studied, this network really wants to minimize its energy. Perfect equilibrium, where there is absolutely zero thixotropic shear, happens at a very specific striction angle, 55.17 degrees. We call that the golden slope. But here's the catch. You know the quantum universe is never completely quiet, right? Quantum fluctuations are constantly jostling this structure. So a tiny geometric gap forms, a delta theta, and it constantly prevents the system from perfectly aligning. And that tiny microscopic geometric gap, that is literally the birthplace of time. Crazy, right? All right, Section 3, the master equation of torsion, basically the software of the universe. Okay, brace yourselves, because this is where the theory actually turns into a mechanical engine. What this formula represents is the master equation of emergent time. And guess what? It's a damped harmonic torsion pendulum. That's it. The universe isn't static. It's twisting, in constant torsion, trying desperately to resolve that geometric tension we just talked about. Time isn't some independent stopwatch anymore. It's the conjugate variable of this exact torsion. Let's break the equation down. It's got 4 main pillars. First up, we have the system's inertia, basically how much the plenum's volume resists rotational acceleration. Second, temporal friction. This is represented by gamma, and it continuously drains energy from the oscillation. Third is the geometric restoring force. Think of it like a universal spring trying to snap everything back to that perfect 55.17 degree angle. And lastly, external torque, driven by the magnitude index, which keeps the whole oscillation from just stopping cold. It's a perfectly choreographed mechanical ballet. This brings us to Section 4, entropy and thixotropic friction, the mechanical link. So remember that damping parameter, gamma? It's evaluated at about 0.172. The fact that we have this friction in a thixotropic fluid mathematically breaks time symmetry. Like if you try to run the math backwards to reverse time, the damping term literally changes its sign. It fundamentally forbids the system from running in reverse. That geometric misalignment we discussed, it generates local shear stress, and this friction relentlessly grinds that stress down, converting the torsion movement into high-frequency heat. And here is where it all clicks. This equation is an absolute game changer. It shows that entropy production is directly proportional to the friction constant times the square of the torsion velocity.
Let that sink in. The second law of thermodynamics, the very thing that's tormented physicists for over a century, is completely derived from a purely mechanical principle. Entropy is literally just the thermal exhaust of reality trying, and failing, to align itself to 55.17 degrees. It perfectly bridges statistical physics and fluid mechanics.
Let's move to Section 5, the jitterbug coupling and driving perpetual motion.
Now, you might be wondering, and you should be, if there is constant friction pumping energy out of the system as heat and entropy, why doesn't this cosmic pendulum just slow down and stop? The answer is something called the jitterbug coupling. Inside the plenum, phase rotation and the universe's actual scale magnitude, which we denote as K, are locked together. A 90-degree internal rotation, or jitterbug motion, mathematically forces the system to jump up a notch in magnitude, so rotation directly creates scale.
Because of this, the system is constantly being pulled down toward the center of the potential well. But thanks to its own inertia and that inherent friction, it doesn't just halt at the bottom. It overshoots the 0 point, gets pulled back, and creates this sustained oscillation. And with every single swing, that jitterbug gear kicks in and ratchets the magnitude index upward. We call this secular drift. That constant asymmetrical ratcheting of scale, that is exactly what we feel as the forward arrow of time.
Which brings us to Section 6, the self-sustaining machine. Let's synthesize all of this. So time boils down to a super elegant 5-step mechanical cycle. First, a quantum perturbation kicks things off. Second, we get a misalignment from that perfect fractal angle of 55.17 degrees. Third, this triggers a massive restoring force, a mechanical torque. Fourth, thixotropic friction fights that movement, generating heat, which is our entropy. And fifth, this whole dynamic forces a drift in the universe's magnitude scale. The engine is self-sustaining. And here is where it gets incredibly cool for us. Within this turbulent, shearing environment, complex structures form. Macroscopic biological entities like you and me are essentially localized wave packets. We are human solitons that somehow persist and maintain our form within this giant thixotropic friction engine. Here is the final blueprint. It pulls the whole global architecture together. You can see all 4 layers stacked up, starting from the superfluid plenum at the base, moving up through the torsion dynamics and the magnitude gearing, right up to the cosmic thermodynamic consequences that we experience as reality. Time is absolutely not a passive container for events. Time is the tangible physical friction of those events rubbing against the fundamental geometry of the universe. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. If time isn't just an empty dimension, but the actual burning friction of a universe endlessly trying to align itself, how does this engine dictate the ultimate thermodynamic fate of our cosmos? And honestly, what does it mean for us, for human solitons, temporarily holding our shape while navigating the intense shear forces of this eternal machine? Forget the old textbook definitions for a minute, dive into this geometry, and keep hunting for the actual gears turning behind reality.